Welcome back to the Marvelous Middle-Age Podcast. This week, I'm speaking with Pam Schulz. Pam is the wife of a high school social studies teacher and mother to two neurodivergent teenage boys. She is currently serving as the executive director of St. Mark's Lutheran Church and previously worked in public education for 20 years as a music teacher and school administrator. Pam is on the executive board of the Iowa P.E.O. Sisterhood and executive board of Marion Cares. She is also a Gallup Certified Strengths Coach. This week, Pam and I discuss how this past year, Pam and her husband launched their oldest son out into the world as he began his first year of college. She shares how they navigated his early educational experiences, how she's adjusting to him being in college, and how her role as mom is changing. It was an encouraging conversation about how our kids can pursue their passions and take their own paths in life. I hope you enjoy this conversation with my friend, Pam Schulz. Pam Schulz, welcome to the Marvelous Middle-Age Podcast.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that you are here. We were just talking a little bit before we were recording about how you and I do not have a hard time having a conversation.
Not at all.
That's what these episodes are. Truly, they are conversations. And so I think we can probably pull that off today with no issue whatsoever.
I don't think we'll have any problem talking.
Well, and that's good. That is a good thing. So before we get started, can you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, a little about your family?
Sure. Well, Pam Schulz, and I have been married for 26 years.
Congratulations.
It's pretty fantastic. I was realizing, that's more than half of my life. But yes, so married 26 years to a wonderful man. His name is Eric, and he's a high school social studies teacher. Yep. And then I have two children, a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old, which is crazy because I met my husband when I was 19. So
you're thinking about one of your sons would be meeting his future spouse right now.
It's kind of freaking me out a little bit. Yes. Yeah. So those are my kids, and I have done lots of different things in my life. My degree is in music education, and then so I did that for 12 years. And then I spent 8 years as an administrator because went back to school and got my educational administration degree. And then I took a big hard right and went to work at our church. Yes. And I did a lot with family ministry, but now I'm doing a lot more. We'll just say that way.
You pretty much run that place, I think is how I would describe your job there.
Just
you
do
keep
a little
it
bit
open.
of everything. Yeah, just
keep the doors open. Yeah,
a little bit of everything.
Right, exactly. Well, and I was trying to think back to how we met, and I think we met at church. If I'm recalling correctly, through programming, and then you joined the staff and family ministry. I was briefly on staff at the church, but then you were there, and so I think it was through St. Mark's that we met originally.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was definitely St. Mark's, but we didn't really get to know each other well until Night to Shine.
Yes, and I'm so glad you brought that up because, so I've mentioned Night to Shine on the podcast before, but Night to Shine is a prom style event for individuals with disabilities. It's sponsored by the Tim Tebow Foundation, and our church will be hosting it for the 7th year. Or probably by the time this airs, it will have hosted it, is what I'm guessing by the time this airs. So in 2024. And so it is an incredible event, but that is where we really connected, I believe, with the planning of Night to Shine. And how I like to characterize Pam's role on the team is the one that keeps Nicole from losing her marbles towards the end of the planning. I mean, I always start out, so hopeful, and it is a lot of work. I mean, It is an amazing event. I love it. I will do it every year. It is amazing, but it's a lot of work. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things that have to happen, volunteers to register and guests to register and donations to get and logistics to put together and preparing the church building for the event, because I think with all of the volunteers, the guests, the families, we were probably looking at 600-700 people in our church all at the same time.
Yeah, and it's one of our largest groups of the year for sure. I mean, the only other time we put more people through our building is probably Christmas and Easter. And then it's spread out a little bit.
Staggered because they're coming in and out for services, whereas this event, everybody's there at the same time, and it's awesome. And we are so, so blessed with the donations that we receive and all the volunteers that pitch in and help out and volunteer their time and all of that. And everybody has such a heart for our guests, and seeing our guests come in and their families come in and just enjoy that night and know that they're there to just be pampered and loved, and to let them know that God loves them and we love them and that they are welcome there. And it's so fun. But yeah, that is where I think we've really spent the most time together, is on Night to Shine. And we're in it right now and it's going great. I think we have a pretty good system for the most part on what we need to do, when we need to do it. We're not reinventing the wheel every time. And we have a great planning team.
Oh, they're fantastic. I mean, that's what makes it worth it. It's the people you're working with. And so, and all of them do what they need to do, and it all happens on time. You never have to worry about that. And it's just so much fun for me to see our church family that are just really not just enjoying themselves, but being able to actually show Christ's love in a very public way.
Yes.
Which is, you don't get to do very often in our current society, I don't think. I think it's hard, especially if you don't work in a church.
Right.
And so it's just a fun way to watch our community enjoy each other as they're showing Christ's love to our guests. And I spend most of the night, by that point the work is done, I spend most of the night just watching people. And it's beautiful. It's probably one of my favorite nights of the year.
Me too. I'm with you. Yeah, I completely agree. I think there aren't a lot of venues and opportunities to kind of publicly let people know, especially a group of individuals like this who typically aren't acknowledged, celebrated, shown that they have value and worth and they have a purpose, that they can come in and it is just a celebration, honestly, to me.
Absolutely.
And I'm with you. You and I kind of have that by design, that you and I were kind of I don't want to say the firefighters for the night, but if something, needs attention or whatever, you and I just we walk around, and we have a big church space, but it feels small that night. We have plenty of room. We always have plenty of room, but there's so many people, but we just walk the space all night, take care of anything that pops up unexpectedly, which usually there's nothing really major, but I love that for us, because we get to kind of walk and just check things out and see those moments, right? See the moments where you see this family walk in if it's their first time attending, and I love the parents' faces, honestly, or the staff or the guardians who come with a guest for the first time, and they look around and go, "This is all for my son or daughter? What in the actual world?" Like, they just can't even believe it. That's probably one of my favorite aspects of Night to Shine.
And now we have, people who've come several years. And so you start recognizing parents, and parents start talking to you in just a different way. And that's been great. And last year I got the joy of watching my son be a buddy.
Yes. That was so fun. We have the best picture of Grant on the dance floor with his guest. If you don't know Night to Shine, every guest is assigned a buddy for the evening. It's just a friend to accompany them. They get to dance with them and eat the meal with them and ride in the limos and do karaoke and play games. And then the dance starts, and we have this amazing picture of Grant with his guests. They are just having so much fun and dancing. It's probably my favorite picture of the night.
Yeah, I got to talk to her mom, and she had said that how grateful she was that she had a buddy that loved to dance. Yeah, because she was dancing just about the entire night, and my son was right out there with her the whole time.
Yeah, our guests love to. I tell when we have volunteer training sessions that happen, and we tell our volunteers, if you're a buddy, wear comfortable shoes, because our guests, they love to dance, they love to celebrate and party. They're not just going to sit there on the sidelines. And we have a few guests that do. They just like to observe. But our dance floor is packed.
Oh, the whole night.
All night.
Whole night long.
All night. It's awesome. So, but that is how we met and how we interact. I feel like a lot. I'm always emailing Pam, what about this? And help me. And or like now when I'm starting to look at how many more buddies we need and how many guests we have. And I'm like, so I need to buckle down and get that handled so I don't lose my marbles like I'm inclined to do when planning an event where there's going to be all those people. And it always works out.
Every year.
I think last year we almost had exactly the same number of buddies as we did guests. Like it worked out perfectly. I think we maybe had one extra buddy.
Yes, every year. It's just amazing to me because it is every year.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. So that's how we have met. And through meeting you, I learned that you have 2 sons. And you said they're 19 and 17.
Yeah, they're about 18 months apart.
Wow. You're brave, lady.
Yeah. Well, I
love
had,
it.
I
I love
had a miscarriage between them that was completely unplanned. And once I had the miscarriage, I just had to be pregnant again. And so that's why they're so close together.
Yep.
I mean,
I love it.
My husband's he's a bonus, I would say. And so he's not as close to his siblings. They're about 11 years older than he is. And so we wanted our kids closer together, but not necessarily 18 months apart.
Yeah. Well, hey, it happens when it happens. It's meant to happen when it's supposed to. And I love that. But all that to say, you recently launched your first child out into the world.
Yes.
He's a freshman.
Yes, freshman at Columbia College, Chicago.
Wow, that is amazing. And your second son will also be launching out into the world as well. And that's exciting.
Yeah, we're almost
coming up
halfway through the senior year. And it just blows my mind. When they were little, everyone would say, "Oh, it goes so fast." I'd be like, "Oh, this is not true. This is so hard." And then all of a sudden I'm like, "Oh, it goes so fast."
Yeah,
exactly
you're one of
the
those.
same. I am one of those.
I think when they start school, I feel like the clock really picks up. When they're little, it's really hard. It's exhausting. They start school and then they get into activities and then all the things happen. And I have heard many parents say when that senior year begins, time you blink and it's over and they
gone.
Graduate from high school.
I heard someone say one time, raising children is the days are long, but the years are short.
Yes.
And I have really found that there are times that the days are really long, but boy, are the years short.
I'm with you 100% on that. I know Nathan keeps reminding me that he's approaching 17. And then that means after this year, I only have one more year of high school. And I'm like, stop. Don't say it. If you don't say it out loud,
it won't happen.
Maybe it won't happen.
Wait a second. It will happen.
Yes, but I know it will. Yeah, exactly. I know it will happen. So the other thing about your sons, like my son, they are neurodivergent.
That's absolutely true, yes.
And so they both have different things going on. And I know you are someone I have asked questions about autism too, because my son is on the spectrum. And so I have asked you a lot of things. And, just knowing someone that had a child like mine that could relate to what I was experiencing. And again, it's not identical, right? Because if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. It's not cookie cutter. But just being able to kind of empathize with, oh, yeah, we've been there. Or, oh, yeah, I've heard of that too, or whatever. That really means a lot to me. So thank you for being that person. Because honestly, outside of you, I really don't, until I met these women I'm in this mother's group with now. I just started that in May. I didn't really know a lot of other parents with neurodivergent kids. So you were really the only one that I really knew. And
I think it's become easier to talk about kids being neurodivergent. I really think there are probably more kids on the spectrum than we knew. Even growing up, that just wasn't we didn't have any terms for it. They were quirky, they were weird, right. They just
naughty.
Didn't fit in,
right?
Naughty, right?
Yeah. Misbehaving,
all those things that now that we've learned a little more, and can know that there are some skills and things to do, that their brains are wired a little bit differently, and our journeys are a little different. That Grant was diagnosed when he was 4.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that, if you don't mind, just kind of your journey into this world of neurodivergent kid parenting.
Yeah. Well, when you have your first kid, you don't know what's not normal because he's just your kid.
Yeah.
And so my my husband and I really didn't think there was anything necessarily different until we got to about 3 years old, where we were realizing, this kid's hard. He does things a little differently for him. One of the, oh my gosh, I remember there's, when he would spill, he has some sensory things. So when he would spill water on himself, he'd just take all his clothes off, which is really hilarious right now. But it's not so funny when they're in your backyard and you have a house full of people and then he's just taking off his clothes.
Yeah.
And so there were some of these little silly moments. And then when things got too overwhelming, he'd just run away. And so I know even when he was in preschool, he got his backpack and called it his jetpack and left the building and to go. And it's because things were too overwhelming. He didn't, that extra stimulus. He had to get away. And through all of those types of experiences, we had lost one daycare because of his behavior. And when we did that, we started looking into more resources. And so went to Grant Wood and was able to find a program. It's called the CART program, where they actually work with your daycare provider, and the daycare provider promises not to release your child from daycare. Huge. It is huge because it's so, when you're working full time, it's, you have to have childcare and you have to have childcare you trust. And it was great for our childcare provider because then she was getting all these skills. She was learning all these strategies. It helped her then with other kids. And not to say Grant was horrible, but he definitely had to parent him in a different way. And I didn't realize how differently we were parenting him, because we would be, preparing for a transition. We'd be saying things and all those things where you're like, hey, we're going to be leaving in about 5 minutes. Whereas with, I think most kids, you say, hey, get your coat on, we're leaving.
Yeah, can't do that with ours.
No, can't do that. And so you realize you're doing things a little bit differently than other people. But at that time, once he got into preschool, that's when we really started seeing his discrepancy from his peers. And had his first IEP when he was 4, and I think it's probably the largest IEP known to man. And a little bit about my background is, so my master's degree is in administration, and you have specialty areas when you're taking your comprehensive exams, and mine was in special ed law. Which,
interesting,
isn't it? And it's, what's interesting about it is I never had any kind of draw to people with different needs. I just didn't have a draw to that, but I understood how my professor would be asking questions. And so I knew, okay, I know how to study for these questions. I know how I can do some things in this educational law course that I dug into that a little bit. Yeah. So because of that, I knew a little more, I think, than some parents.
Right.
And so I did. I knew I could invite people. And so our childcare provider was there. Awesome. At the time, there was two different. It was a part-time principal thing, so both principals were there. I worked in the district, so they knew me as well. We had our director of children's ministry from our church there. Nice. Because I knew that if whatever skills we were learning at home, we need to be reinforcing at school and also reinforcing at childcare, so it was consistent all the way through.
You bet.
And so I think that for Grant, that was incredibly important, and I also think it's part of what's made him successful now, is that early intervention, just learning skills and recognizing it is skills, and not just he's being naughty.
Right. No, it absolutely. I completely agree with all of that. It comes down to the fact that our kids' brains function differently. They have different neurology. Yep. So they have to be educated a little bit differently, parented a little differently. Childcare has to function a little differently for them. And when people understand that and they're willing to work with us and our kids and supportive and understanding and have compassion and patience and all of those things, it makes a world of difference. And for the child, absolutely, because like you said, it impacts them so far down the stream, but us as parents, right? The feeling that you have as a parent as, okay, I'm not, doing this wrong. I have a child who has a different brain, and there are things we can do.
Absolutely. And that makes things a little bit easier. And I would say, and that is also, there's the child's personality as well. Grant is definitely a people pleaser. He wants to succeed. He has that kind of drive. And so that helps even when things were hard. But by the time he was in 4th grade, I made him go to his IEP meetings, and he had to start the meetings and introduce himself to the people there. And he had to explain his disability and then what worked for him. And he started doing that in 4th grade because I told him, I said, this is your plan. It is not my plan. I'm a part of your team, but your name is on this. It's Grant Schulz's plan, not mine.
Right.
And so he also has the cognitive ability to work that.
To do that.
He's also twice exceptional. Both of my children are twice exceptional, meaning so he was doing some tag services at the same time. He has some incredible behavior challenges in the case of Grant. And so doing that, I knew he had the cognitive ability to get it. And I remember very distinctly in 5th grade, he's saying to me, because now you're in middle school, right? You start to at least pick up a little bit of what's going on around you. And he says, how do I get rid of the person following me around all the time? That was this paraprofessional. And I said, okay, buddy. Well, I said, so you know how we talk about your goals and what you're going to do, and we have a graph. And I said, well, you've got to go, so many days where you get this score, and then we can start talking about it. You better believe it. Within the next day, every day after he had hit that score, because he just needed to know what is my target, and now I'm going to hit it. And because he didn't want them to follow him around anymore, as he said.
Oh my gosh.
But so he, and then, because he'd been involved the whole way through, he did have the goal to be off his IEP when he left middle school, and he did it. And so he was able to not have an IEP when he went into high school, and he had a 504 plan. And so that, that's a unique journey of his that is not the case in a lot of kids. But as you said, you meet one person with autism, you meet one person with autism, and he was able to, do that with just the way his brain's wired, but also just his personality, his drive, all of those things. My other son is very different. We didn't really learn about his twice exceptionality until 7th grade. So we have very different journeys. My other child kind of flew under the radar a little bit because my oldest was so challenging at times.
Yeah.
And so having that fly under the radar and just kind of be average does not have the same kind of drive as my oldest. Has a drive in a very different way. But because of that, we got to 7th grade and he would be reading at a 12th grade level. But he was on the first percentile for phonemic awareness and phonics. So once you get to 7th grade and you're into math or into science and social studies and these bigger words and people's names and all of that. And I said, well, what do you do? Well, I just skip them. I don't know them. Okay, so this explains why. Yeah. Okay, so then we kind of dug into that. We're at the University of Iowa, and really that's when we found out about it. He is really his dyslexia, dysgraphia, dysnomia, just about any dys you can think of would be on his name. But what that really helped me understand was we had heard for a very long time in his journey, he's just so smart, I don't understand why he won't do this. And he couldn't. But, it was really overshadowed by some of the challenges that we were seeing with his brother. But at the same time, he's the same thing. He was in TAG, even though he had some major challenges, which is schools just aren't really designed for twice exceptional students or neurodivergent students, really.
Don't even get me started. In my mother's group, that is something I talk about all the time. And please understand, anyone listening, teachers, education, I support it all. I am a huge fan, but for children like ours, traditional education, the way our educational system is designed does not work. And there are schools that have phenomenal programs, supports, everything under the sun. Now, some schools don't, but some schools do, and they do what they can do. Yeah. But at the end of the day, they're just not. So if you have a child who's neurodivergent, or you're listening, you have a grandchild who's neurodivergent, that's just something you always have to bear in mind. It's not the school's fault. It's not your fault. It's not your child's fault. It's just the system.
Yeah, it's the way their brains are wired that doesn't fit the necessary mold. And I will say, my kids would not be here where they are today without the school.
Absolutely.
We have so many amazing people along the way that have helped Grant. I mean, so much so that at his dismissal IEP, I actually invited his preschool teachers, every special education teacher, all the way up through middle school, because all of them had a piece of his success, right? And so I also knew that these preschool and kindergarten, first grade teachers, they've never been to an IEP dismissal where they've actually gotten to
Most
see,
kids don't.
right?
Yeah.
They've been at all these initials, but they haven't gotten to see a kid meet all their goals and then graduate, I guess, from, you know, be able to do his services in a different way through a 504. And so, it was just amazing. Even one of his teachers who was retired came back and was at that meeting. And it was really important to me that all of those teachers understood how much I appreciated it, because all of us learned with him. I mean, it wasn't, and there were so many people that dove in and tried to figure out how to help. And that was important to me. And I think that's, you know, Grant saw that. He actually has, you know, there's 2 teachers specifically that he really credits as having a big impact on why he's able to do what he's doing. And I never heard him talk about that until last year. I think it's the senior year thing, you know,
reflecting and looking back.
And I was like, well, I wish you would have told me that in middle school.
Right. That would have really, as your parent, that would have been really cool to know. Yeah. Oh,
but yeah, so that, you know, I say that, you know, school's not designed that way. But there are so many people within the school that are doing everything they can to help my kid.
Absolutely.
And I just so appreciated that. And I know some people don't have a relationship with their IEP team or their school.
Yeah.
That is, it might be difficult. And I just am so blessed that I never have felt mine to be difficult, and that people had wanted to really help.
Right.
And there was a really good communication there with the school, and I had no problem saying, hey, this is going on at home too. And I think that's sometimes hard. You know, I was really open and vulnerable with how I was feeling what was going on, which then allowed us all to be able to problem solve a little better.
Right. I think my experience for my son has been the same. We've had a great team all along the way, everyone really wanting to try to do whatever they could to be creative and problem solving and supports and what would be helpful. And now it's to the point now where he can share what would be helpful. If anything, I feel like he's learned through this process is to how to advocate for himself. And so he advocates for himself. Sometimes I don't always agree with what he wants to do, but he's trying to advocate for himself. And that's a skill that he's learned through this process as well. And yeah, it takes a village. I mean, it takes a group of people who are committed to supporting your child. But I agree. I think if we as parents also have to be vulnerable in that and share, like, this is happening at home. I don't know if you're seeing it here. Or I always would tell Nathan's teachers at the beginning of the year, like, I'm here to support you. So if there's things you're seeing at school, please let me know, because I need to know so we can, be consistent with and what you're doing so we can be consistent at home, and vice versa. I will tell you when something's happening at home so that you're aware of if he comes in a certain kind of way, like this is why he's acting like that.
You have all that, but then you layer that on top of it, regular teenage stuff of, trying to...
Neurodivergence and puberty is the worst.
Oh, I know. And trying to, still get their way and be a little manipulative, which are all common, regular, everyday teenage things. And so kind of trying to tease that out.
Is it your is this an autistic thing, or is this just a teenage hormone thing?
Teenage boy
Tell
thing.
me.
Yes. And so
what is happening?
It is so hard. I think that was probably one of the hardest things about all of it. But just for me, being able to see the growth through high school in my kids, and I would say for both of my kids, I've really tried by the time they got to high school that I would back off a little bit, which is really hard for me. But I would just really try to say things like, okay, if you don't contact your teacher in the next 2 days about this, then I will. So, and I don't want to contact the teacher, and you don't want me to either. Yes. So kind of, what do you need for that, to be doing that? And so that was, I think that helps. It's really hard though, as you're getting to be a parent without them right in your home, to figure out, how do you parent now?
Right.
Know?
And I want to get into that because, Grant is in college and he's out there not living in your home anymore. And you've launched him into the world. And we never stop being their parents, right? It doesn't matter how old they are. Never. If they're 2, 12, 22, 32, that never stops. However, it changes, right? And so what has the last year been like? Or not quite a year, but the last months have been for you personally, and then for your family, just him going out into the world.
Well, and and him going out into downtown Chicago. I mean, when I say my son's going to school in Chicago, I think people picture the suburbs. No, he's living on the corner of Ida B. Wells and State Street, right by the Bean. I mean, he's a block from the Art Institute. He is living.
He's in Chicago,
the city, right? And so that has been. I think would be a challenge for any parent, whether or not they're neurodivergent.
I think sending your child off to college is challenging. With neurotypical students, let alone when you have a student who's neurodivergent.
And I really had to I asked lots of questions about like the disability office and what things would be available. He had a 504. How does that look when we get to college? And that was really on my head and my brain. But for Grant, I think he was really thinking about how, by his end of his senior year, his teachers didn't even know he had a 504, right? Like he was just able to make it in class. And when there would be a hiccup or a bump, and I would say, have you reminded your teacher about your 504? And he goes, well, I don't even know if they know I have one. I said, okay. Right. Well, so that would be there. But that happens so few and far between by the time we got to junior and senior year that I think what was hard for me is I really wanted him to take his 504 to his college, walk into the disability office. I wanted him to do all these things. And he didn't do any of them. And then I had to say, okay, this isn't my life. It's his life. I have to say, yes, he's learned all of these skills. I had to remind myself he didn't really use it this last year, which is, not every kid, but it is for him. And so that was really hard because then I'm just nervous about what happens when he gets into these situations at school and he doesn't have that backing of that 504. But we've been really, I don't know. You don't get to see any of their grades. I assume he's doing fine. Right. Right. Yep. That's the hard part, right? Like I had power school and I'd look at it,
Oh, we are in it. Like when they're in school under, K through 12, like you're seeing everything. You're getting the emails and the phone calls and the power school and the things. And then to just have that just drop off so sharply, like you can't see anything.
No, because Grant turned 18 in September of his senior year. So he was 18 most of his senior year. And at that point, you don't see any medical stuff anymore. You don't see, unless your child gives permission.
They say,
And so when we would go to the doctor, I'd go with him and he'd sign the paperwork. But I always had to say, you don't have to do this. And so would the doctors, because I knew they would. Right. You don't have to do this. And so because we had that his senior year, I had a little bit of practice of not seeing everything. What was harder though is like as you're going through all of the applications for colleges and those kinds of things went to him that had deadlines that I didn't see. And
That's
I don't
hard.
know. Yes,
when you're a parent who's used to being on everything, and then all of us, and our kids sometimes struggle with some of that, right?
They
so
do.
Those executive functioning skills of, I need to get this in by such and such. Wow. I mean, that's...
And I was trying to figure out how do I help him have the skills. So for example, as we're going through scholarships, right? And I said, okay, honey, I will set up the spreadsheet so you can see here the due dates and we can talk about what you need, but I can't do any of it. And so I can let you see how I set this up so that next year I won't be at school.
Yeah.
You're going to have to do these in the spring. I won't be able to remind you. And so I'm hoping that by setting some of that up,
right.
that
little infrastructure for him to use going forward.
And to teach him how to use it. And I think it was so funny. He's going to school for filmmaking.
Yes.
And he had to do a short film for some of his applications. And so to see him have to do that, and that's being a project manager. I mean, it's filmmaking is completely, it's not all about being creative.
Right. I mean, there's that element, but it's about deadlines and getting things done and
getting
certain
people
things
together
and leading people and all
those things. And so it was really, he had to talk to the principal because he secured the gym, and it had talked to the wrestling coach and got some singlets. And I mean, he was doing all these things because this thing was on, it's Leave It on the Mat. It was on wrestling. And so had two people that were wrestling in it and had to have a crew, and then he knew he had to feed them. And so it was the week before his shoot, and he goes, Mom, I'm going to send you an email. I said, okay. He goes, well, I know you sometimes read Dad's emails when they're really important, and I just want it to be someone else to read it. And I thought it was so cute because it's true, right? I have my husband read really important emails before I send them.
Sure.
Or the same way, or someone at work.
Right. Someone else just get another set of eyes on it.
Right? This email, he knew it was going to his principal. It was going to about 3 teachers. It was going to his crew that he was going to be doing. So it had his friends on it too. And so he wanted to make sure that he was, okay, so do I have everything, Mom? Do you understand what I'm asking and what I need on certain days? And then he's so funny because he's so considerate. He's like, it sounds kind of bossy. Is that okay? And I said, honey, you're the director. Yes, you're supposed to. You are the boss. You are the boss. You're supposed to, you just need to be clear. You're not being mean. You're being, I
People
need the
want
gym
that too.
at
They
3
want
o'clock on this date. Or you're just saying, I'm confirming I have the gym at 3 o'clock on this date. And that way they know, yes, there's some clarity in that. That's not being bossy.
Oh, I love that.
But so
that's a people pleaser, though.
He is a people pleaser.
That's someone who wants everybody to be happy and not think they're trying to boss everybody around.
Well, and it just went a little different than I think he had imagined it would be because, you're working with people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That always makes things real interesting.
But it was really good to see him do that and put that together. And I think it's helped him now this year when you have to be a little more independent. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Which you are. And he has, and I don't know if we've even talked about this, but he's having a real education. Their part-time faculty are on strike right now. And so.
Oh, dear.
Oh, yeah. So it's made, he's having education, not just only in his classroom about living in a city, but now a little bit about unions, which is actually a really good thing because he's going to be in one.
Right.
In
his industry.
The screenwriters, just were on a very long strike.
Yeah.
And so he kind of needs to know what that's like as well.
Yeah. The dynamics of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so that's been interesting. I've actually gotten quite a bit of communication from the college just about that because that has been something different, but certainly not about individual things about his classes or anything else. And his roommate situation is what I was most anxious about.
Sure.
And he's going to a creative arts school. So seeing people he doesn't typically hang out with as much in Iowa. Mm-hmm. And so
little diversity, a little different
absolutely
group.
Diversity and different ways people think. So I was more nervous about that than he was. Mm-hmm. And I think that my husband is having a little bit harder time than I am because he became best friends with his roommate his freshman year in college. I did not, right? I still talk to them.
Right.
But send a Christmas card maybe.
Right.
But did not become my best friend. We didn't spend the rest of college together. But that's what happened to my husband. And so having a roommate where they're fine, right? They don't, they they sign a contract. I mean, it's so different than when we went to school. They sign a contract and all those things about this is how it's going to be in the room, and they are abiding by that. But they're not best friends, right? They don't
they're
go
just
to
roommates now.
They're just roommates, which actually I think. When I was talking to some other people, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because they're getting along. They're not getting each other's way.
As long as they're getting along and they're
they just don't
able
really
to
talk
live
to
together.
each other.
Yeah.
Just don't
and
really
that's,
talk to
that
each
doesn't
other.
have to be. Yeah.
No. So that he's slowly, but just like a lot of kids that are neurodivergent, making friends is really difficult. It took Grant a long time. And he has an amazing group of friends actually that became because they're so close in age, became Jackson's friends too. So they're actually still over at my house almost once a week still this now, just like they were the last couple of years with Grant. And so that has been a joy to be able to have that group of individuals still coming around my house. And even though a couple of them are graduated, some of them are still in school, and so
kind of helps bridge that gap a little bit from one child leaving and one child still being at home. And it's not like this, just, you never see these kids anymore.
Right. And I think that was going to be that was going to be hard too, is, I was lucky enough to be the house that, my kids play Dungeons and Dragons, and, I was the house they came to every single week for 3 hours, and we're in our basement, and I wasn't so sure about the game, but then as you're like listening, they're not on their phones, they're not on a video screen, they're working in a cooperative group. For Grant, he's the dungeon master, and so that meant he was doing a lot of creative storytelling, right, and creating the different things, which I think is just going to be helpful in his career of choice. And so that's been really fun. And now his brother's doing some of that. And so I think Grant, one time he was talking with me about, they talk about mental health all the time in school now, and the mental health challenges there are. And he had asked me sometime and wondered, I wonder if it's because I have autism that I'm not having some of these troubles, because I don't think about some things in the same way. So he was even trying to figure it out. And I really think if you look at some of the statistics on all that stuff, he has a group of friends that met together every single week, together, face to face, enjoying each other's company, cooperatively doing something together, that wasn't competitive. And then he has a strong faith, and all of those things I think really impact that more so than maybe necessarily having autism and seeing social things in a different way. But I don't know. So it was an interesting conversation to have with him, but he's loving living in Chicago. And
that's great.
I guess to be 19 and living in a city on your own and not having to have your parents
The dream.
Right?
Living his best life right now.
I'm sure he is. And he even told my other son who's home and was like, oh, he's been working at Hy-Vee and he has a little bit of money, and he was trying to figure out if he would buy this. He would be my other son likes to put things together. So put together his own gaming PC with the different components. And Grant says to him, do it now, right now. Mom and dad are kind of your safety net, but you won't have that next year.
Right. Little helpful hint, brother.
Little helpful hint, bro.
Keep that in mind.
Just, now I'm here, and that's it. So it was kind of fun to overhear that conversation between those two. And they're really become best friends. They talk to each other almost every night on the phone, which is a blessing. I had no idea, when they're little and they're arguing all the time and frustrated with one another. They still get frustrated with one another.
They're siblings. That happens. That's how you roll.
But it's fun to see them be really good friends. And I really think the pandemic has something to do with that. We were the only people they had were the people at home, and that was us and each other.
You had to, right? What choice did we have?
So
Absolutely.
I'm so far, I think Grant's done a pretty good job, probably better than his parents with moving forward.
Yeah.
But I also think it's so funny is I had, his last, I would say the most emotional I was district wrestling. He's wrestled forever.
Yep.
That's a community I didn't know that I would really enjoy. The people and the sport. It was a sport I didn't know a whole lot about. But just perseverance, determination, the individualization of what you have to do, and being able to know that, you can't blame anybody else,
No,
right?
it's you on the mat.
You on the mat, and that how hard you work impacts your results, and being able to see that and see my son really figure some of that out. Who was not a great wrestler, but a good wrestler. He wrestled varsity, but a really good wrestler, and just a good community. And it was district wrestling, and where I was sitting in the stands, it was our last meet all together, and that's when I'm realizing, oh my goodness, the people I've like sat next to every Saturday in the winter for 4 years I'm not going to be sitting next to them next winter. And it was, all of the senior boys, it was so weird. They were sitting with their parents in the stands. And I'm like, did your coach tell you to do that? He's like, no. And it was just, I was like,
no, waterworks.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, this is something he's loved. And I knew it would be, the end for him. And it's not something you do at an arts school. They don't have club wrestling.
Nope. Not on the docket.
Certainly, Iowa is a unique place with that when it comes to wrestling.
Yes.
And so, that was a hard, and my husband's like, I can't believe you're already getting so emotional, blah, all these things. And, it was kind of some of those the last concert, those kinds of things.
Yes.
But then when we got to graduation, I was actually really pretty good. I was enjoying my time talking to people at the party, enjoying the ceremony. And by that point, I had already walked a whole bunch of steps with Grant. And it was, by the time we got to dropping him off to school, it was my husband who was a wreck. And I think it's kind of like, right, when you're pregnant and you have 9 months of this baby growing, and you're experiencing things, it's a human, and then all of a sudden the baby gets there and your husband's like, oh, it's a baby,
right?
Like
this is the first time they're realizing
oh my
that.
gosh, you're having a baby. And so it was kind of sort of a little, I felt a little bit reminiscent of that.
See that,
where I had taken just some more time over the year to I think doing a little bit more reflection and acceptance. And so, not to say it was necessarily easy,
no,
but it was certainly just, I think I was just a little more prepared.
Right. And, and that we listening to you kind of process through that. It's like, yeah, that actually would be a really good way to work through those lasts, and let yourself feel in the moment what you want to feel. And then that way, not that, like you said, it's easier, but at least it's not hitting you like a ton of bricks all at one time. You kind of take it in little bite-sized little pieces as opposed to one big,
Yeah, and you're prepared a little bit. And, I will say this last summer was challenging, and he was, I just think as my mom would say to me, there's a reason you get, butt heads with your parents that last year, because so it doesn't hurt so much when you say
you're
goodbye.
ready.
You're ready.
You're ready
right?
for them to go.
And so there's a little bit of butting heads with that, and still some challenges with kind of getting his job started here. But once it worked through them, it was great. He actually has a job too. I mean, he worked at the Raising Cane's here in Cedar Rapids, and they just transferred stores.
Nice.
And so he's working, and he's keeping that job, and able to get his stuff done. So it's exciting.
Awesome. Yes.
And I'm so proud of him. I actually, I think that because of some of his challenges, I know how hard he's had to work to be able to function in the world. And which is one reason why with school, I mean, I get it. They have to live in this world. And so we have to give our kids the skills to live in this world, even though their brains function in a different way.
Right.
And so I was very cognizant of that, especially the end of this high school career of you have to be able to function when I'm not next to you.
Yeah.
That means what skills do you need?
Right. That's what I feel, honestly, like this year and next year is my mission is to prepare my child to live independently of me.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
It's not so much, I mean, yes, the academics of school are important, but it's some of these life skills that, and it's also resilience. And how do you cope when you lock your keys in your car, or responding to different things that can pop up, right? So it's my mission to prepare him to live independently of me, you know, teaching him all the stuff you have to do to maintain your household, right? The laundry and the cleaning and the bill paying and we've got the laundry thing figured out. It's some of the other stuff. It's putting the laundry away, hanging up the laundry so it doesn't land on the floor. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you, and I think for us, and I'm not saying neurotypical parents don't do all these things too, but we also know how much harder it can be for our kids to master some of these skills or kind of get them to stick and really sink in. So when it happens and we see them out there and they're doing things, it's just like, okay, not that my work here is done. I don't mean that, but it's like, wow. You know, that's amazing.
I couldn't believe it. You know, we were just Thanksgiving break. He was going to come back with my brother because my brother lives in the suburbs, and but my brother had to work a little longer because the strike. One of his classes wasn't happening, so he could come a couple days earlier. So I got the phone call that said, "So, Mom, are the 3 digits on the back of your credit card this code they're looking for?" Yeah, he was buying his own bus ticket back. He figured out where the bus would pick him up, what bus company he'd need to go through, and he got a bus he had to walk about 5 minutes from his dorm and get on a bus and transfer a bus someplace, and was dropped off at the Cedar Rapids Airport. So, and he did that all with the only thing he wanted to question about that number they're looking for, right? That's that 3 digits on the back of your credit card. Yep.
That's
so
awesome.
it is. It's so amazing to see how much he's grown up in this, even just this first semester.
Yeah.
Knowing that, you know, he knew he needed a schedule, and so he goes, yep, so Tuesday's my laundry day, and so he does his laundry on Tuesdays. Same day he does his D&D, still does Dungeon Master with a club there, and so that's 3 hours every week where he's with a group of people. And
that's
so
awesome.
he just he's been involved with clubs. He's done that. He was very involved in high school, so it's fun to see him involved now in college as well.
Continuing.
So even though he might not have a best friend at college, he certainly has a group of people that he hangs out with, and does, you know, has a place to go.
I love that.
So that's fun.
That.
You know, my other kiddo, he's taking a very different path. We were really, when we got done at the University of Iowa in 7th grade, then they really said, you know, your journey over this next 5 years is going to be figure out what accommodations he's going to need to be successful. And the school's been actually much harder for him. And I think it's because of how discrepant his what's going on in his head is compared to what he can get out on paper. And I can't imagine how frustrating that would be.
Oh,
right.
Absolutely.
I can't even imagine. And so I think he, more than anybody else, knows that a typical school setting isn't going to be where he's successful. And so he's not planning to go to college. And that's really hard for somebody who's had great grandparents that have gone to school, right? Like Eric, his generation, it's their first generation to go to college, whereas mine, it's been a really long time.
It's like a tradition, a family.
It is a tradition.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it was really important that we didn't pressure that ever, because part of it was we just had no idea if either one of them would be able to.
Right.
And we didn't want to put that kind of pressure on them. And so it's been a little bit harder to go, okay, yep, my other guy, that's not his heart. That's not where he is. That's not what he's going to do well at, but it's allowing him to pursue what he wants to do. And he's planning to be a railroad conductor. And so,
I love that.
Right. And he said,
how does one become a railroad conductor?
Oh, you apply to a short line railroad, or we just visited Johnson County Community College, and they have a railroad conductor certificate. And so,
didn't know there was such a thing. That's fascinating.
Isn't
I love
it fascinating? And he said to me, you know what? Every 4-year-old boy thinks they're going to be driving a train, and I'm going to.
I
he's
love that. Oh,
so,
that's awesome.
You know, because he's always loved trains from the very beginning, you know, and in the mechanical part of it, right? He has a model railroad he works on. He wanted to build his own gaming PC, right? I mean, just that's
mechanically inclined brain.
Yeah, very much so. And no one else in our house is. Like, our lawnmower quit, and he was He was in small engine club at school. So our lawnmower quit. He went out and he goes, oh, I'll be right back. I got to get something at the store. He got the part. He fixed the lawnmower. I'm like,
hey, that's nice to have.
Right. And so that's why I'm saying his brain just works differently than mine for sure.
Well,
but
yeah,
right. But
too.
he could diagnose that problem and do that. So that's why I think really being, when he's on his way, and this is really what he wants to do, but he has a plan. He's going to do another summer of Camp Wapsie counseling, and then he's going to apply to short line railroads in July and also to Johnson County Community College, because with that, you don't have to have the conductor certificate to be hired.
Okay.
But, it looks better, right?
Yeah,
like,
it would kind of boost your application.
Yeah, and so he's planning to apply to railroads, and then if he doesn't get hired, he'll go through the program, and then hopefully that would move his application towards the top of the list.
I love that.
So
I love it how there's and I tell in this mother group I'm in there, all the other mothers have children who are younger than my son. I said there is a path for everybody.
Oh, absolutely.
There is a path for everyone. It doesn't have to be traditional college. It can be so many different avenues. Don't lock yourself into one way. It has to be done this way or no way. There are so many different paths.
Oh yeah. And
for kids.
My husband and I were very traditional of, went to high school, went to 4-year college, graduated, got our first job, got a master's degree, right? I mean, just went right down the path. And, so we've also had to allow ourselves to think something differently. I know I said a couple years ago, I can't believe I think about letting my kid go to film school, right? Like what am I thinking about? And then I'm like, well, every single thing now, every single marketing department needs a videographer, right? I mean, everybody needs somebody who knows how to do those skills now in our world. So I'm like, okay, he'll work. He'll be able to support himself.
Right.
But so seeing that, he's my kid who said to me, Mom, do you go to college for your passion or your backup plan? Who can say backup plan? I couldn't. Right. No. I'm like, hon,
wow.
It's your passion, but there are things like minors, and I know you like to code as well.
Right.
Some of this.
Yeah, you can have a backup plan. You can do that if you want to. And to think about people who are able to do that, right? To go to school to do something they're passionate about. That is a blessing.
Oh, and we just are able to, and I know I'm in a unique position where we're able to let our kids do that. But allow them to love something and continue to explore it, even when it's completely different from anything I would consider. I love watching movies, but I certainly wouldn't have any idea or desire to make them necessarily. I'm learning a lot. Yeah. And maybe I would now.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right. I know. Isn't it funny? You kind of see like, oh, wow, I didn't even know that was a thing you could do. Some of the things that kids are doing now, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see. Would you have anything? So I'm thinking, I'm year 2 behind you in all of this. What are some, is there anything you would say, any words of wisdom, guidance that you would give parents and again, it can apply to neurodivergent parenting, neurotypical parenting, whatever, that you would give to parents of older, teenagers who are getting ready to launch? Anything that you just would say to keep in mind as you're going through all of this?
Well, and I had heard this, a long time ago. Let your kids make small mistakes now so that you help them learn that so they don't make a really big one later. Yeah. And so as hard as it is to let your kids make some of those mistakes or to struggle through something, I think it's really important because now I'm not as concerned about having my kid living in Chicago. Right. I mean, just the regular concerns everybody would have, but allowing him to have had a few things he's had to work through where I can give a piece of advice, but say, I'm not taking care of this for you. Right. I just think it's really important to allow kids to make mistakes while you're still there to help teach through those mistakes, or even just through life. I mean, life happens, and that's not even necessarily a mistake you made, but it's something that you're going to have to deal with. And if kids haven't had to struggle through some of that, then they don't know what to do later.
Right. They don't have those skills, those
Right.
problem solving skills, that resilience.
Yeah.
Going
So
forward.
I guess that would be my big thing. And then it's as hard as it is, for me, some of it was letting them deal with a grade that's not great. I mean, like, I could stay on top of Power School as much as I wanted, but I really had this is your grade, this is your class. This is the impacts you might see going down the road. If you don't do this, this is the impacts you may see. And my younger son's dealing with that right now because he didn't get the good student discount. So he's paying us $42 a month for his car insurance because he didn't reach that. And now he's a little bit more on top of his grades. Isn't that interesting how that natural consequence?
Money talks.
That's right. For him, it does. But some of those things where it's like, I want to lay out the consequences so you know what they are. But at the same time, really, this is not that big a deal for you to pay $42 a month, right? I mean,
there are a lot of worse things that could happen.
And so how do I help you see that? And so I would say that would be that, and then just to enjoy the time that you have with what they're interested in, because it might be a unique interest, like trains. I can't even tell you how many trains we've gone to go stand at a train track, but now he's going to possibly be in this career where it is a good career. Hours are awful, but it is a career. He can make a good life out of it. And my son, who is making movies, wanted to be behind the camera when we live stream at church. He was behind the camera in the booth every Sunday for 2 years. Yeah. And so has some skills that are different than his peers in college because of it. And so I don't know, go with what your kids like, jump in even when it's weird. I mean,
absolutely.
Because that's,
the hardest thing for me is that Nathan's specific interests are things I'm just like, oh, if I have to hear one more fact about the Titanic or about some World War II Pacific era naval aircraft carrier, I'm going to barf. But he loves it and he knows about it and he's passionate about it. And I have a feeling he'll pursue some type of career in his area of interest. And that's great. But yeah, as a parent, sometimes you're like, oh, if I have to go stand in front of another train, I'm going to just.
Well, and then, it's, it gives you then that opportunity when you're doing that with them, that when you see something or you hear about something, you're watching a YouTube or something that is something your kid will relate to. Now you share that with them and all of a sudden your kid understands how much you love them. I know one of Grant's first papers he had to write, which is hard for a neurodivergent kid, was how can you know you're loved? Talk about, like how was love being shown? And it's this class, that they're really trying to dig into emotion. I mean, it's dig into different emotions, those kinds of things. And he just could not wrap his brain around that. And so I'm like, well, every time I showed up at a wrestling meet or, and just kind of went through some of these things, these would be like how you might see love. Cause it was, how do you see love in your life? And he's like, oh yeah. Right. And so, I think our neurodivergent kids, maybe need a reminder of that, but they get it.
Some of them can struggle a little bit with the emotional, identifying feelings and identifying feelings in others and reading emotions and interpreting emotions and what that means. And
and I'm just, I would also say, I've been really, I don't know if it's the timing of the pandemic or what, but my kids have really been really open with me about things. And I think part of it is because I don't freak out. It's, kids experience things in a very different way. Changing pronouns or, all the things that are going on in their life that I didn't have to deal with, and the same way. But, I think that just during the pandemic, we were all they had. And so we got to know each other better. And we did vacation together as family, and I remember we were on the Cycle the Erie Canal. We rode 400 miles in 8 days with a program, and they had a person in charge of families. And the person said at this thing, so you can tell, my goodness, this has been since the kids were like in 2nd grade, and I still remember it, had said to us about creating shared memories, because at one time you're going to want to be friends with your children as well as their parents. And if you don't have shared experiences, that's hard to do. So that I really took that to heart.
Oh, yeah.
And having those shared experiences. Our family loves to travel. We travel a lot, and try and experience new things while we're there. And, you know, my son that loves trains, we took Amtrak to the Grand Canyon, even though I had never really felt like I wanted to be on a train that long, but it was great. We had a roomette and went out to the Grand Canyon and took the train from that hotel up to the rim.
Oh my gosh.
It was great, you know, but it's those shared experiences.
The memories you're always going to have as a family.
Right. And I think once you have those shared experiences, you have some things to laugh about, talk about, and then continue to have shared experiences.
Right.
I think those are all things that are important to build upon. We went out for the Iowa Northwestern game at Wrigley.
Heck yeah.
And my son took the red line and met us there, and so got to hang out with our friends, and that was fun. You know, you're starting to see him move into a different part of his life. You know, being definitely still being his parent, but being able to have different conversations like I get to have with my mom. And so that's pretty amazing.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, I have really enjoyed this conversation. It's given me some insights into that next phase of my parenting journey with my child. And if you're listening and you have a child or a grandchild that is getting ready to go out into the big world, I hope that this conversation has given you some perspective on what that can look like and what that journey can look like. I ask each of my guests at the end of every episode 2 questions about being in midlife. You know, you're in midlife, you're parenting, you're working, but what is right now for you one of the best things about being in middle age in this stage of life?
I think knowing yourself.
Yeah.
That I've made mistakes. I've had to live some life. I've because of some of those living life things, for me it's knowing, and it's a really strong connection to the faithfulness of God, and that knowing that I am enough just the way that God has designed me, who I am. And I think it sometimes takes all the way to middle age to get that. And
Agreed.
I think that is something that has been really, it's good to kind of relax into. I heard someone say, when I'm 50, I'll just say whatever I want anymore. There's a little bit of that, right?
Absolutely.
There's a little bit of that. I know what I think. I know who I am. I have my core roots. And I think that's probably what I like most right now. Not saying that there isn't still that anxiety about different things, or certainly you feel sometimes like I don't have the right skills to do this, or any of those, especially being a woman. Right. I was so shocked. I saw a job description the other day. Someone had pointed out to me, it's for the tech industry, and said, you know, a guy will apply to a job if they meet about 60% of the qualifications, but a woman feels like they have to check every single box before they apply to a job. And they say, we encourage women to apply to this job, even if you don't think you check every single box. And so, you know, to use some of those statistics that we see about women and how we view ourselves, I think then as you learn some of that, you're like, okay, maybe I can put myself out there a little bit more. So, you know, knowing some of that, but recognizing, I still have some things I got to work on.
Sure. Absolutely. We're human beings, right? We're not perfect, for sure. Absolutely. So if you could go back and tell yourself, you know, go back to your 20s and tell yourself something about this stage of life to reassure 20-something Pam, what would you say?
Oh, 20-something Pam. If things don't go exactly the way they thought they would, it's actually going to be better.
Love that. Oh, I love that. Yep. Yeah. I think when we're younger, we have such a need to want everything to it needs to play out like this. And if it doesn't, then I am not good enough, or I failed, or something bad is going to happen to me. And that is such a great point. I love that. That's perfect. I think that'll be mine too. That's what I'll tell myself. Not like we're control freaks or anything like that.
Well, and it is, right? I am. Yeah. I will say that, I'm a perfectionist. I am someone who has to be in control, and I recognize about myself. But I've also now lived enough life to realize it's okay.
Yeah. And we're not in control, right?
We're not.
We're not. Nope. We're not. And as much as we want to try to, or be, or whatever, we're not. So it's better just to say, but then to know that, if we would have just known that in our 20s.
That it's actually okay, when things don't go the right way, or the way you think is the right way. It's fine. It'll be good.
Absolutely. And right. And a lot of times it does end up being way better than you ever thought it could be in a million years.
My brother just asked me on Thanksgiving, which was just a couple weeks ago, did you ever think you'd be doing this, working in a church? Yeah. I'm like, not in a million years.
I love that.
And he's like, so do you like it? I said, I love my job.
Yeah.
I love what I do. And so I just think I would have never pictured that in my 20s ever. And to see that kind of playing out now, it might have been a rough path to get there in some ways, but it was where I needed to be at this time. And so it's fun to look back and see how that all got there.
Isn't that great? I love it. I love it. Well, Pam, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I think people are really going to enjoy listening to this conversation. And so thanks for being on.
Yeah, thank you.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow the show to make sure the latest episode is on your podcast feed each week. I would greatly appreciate a rating and a 5-star review on the podcast platform you're listening on. It helps others to find the show. If there are topics you'd like to have discussed on the show, please email me at themarvelousmiddleagepodcast@gmail.com. The Marvelous Middle Age Podcast is produced by Riley Mullane and is part of the Ananellis Studios Network.